A while back, I made a video titled The Myth of the Monopoly, where I discuss how the term is a weasel word to scare people into supporting regulations on big businesses. The myth of the monopoly is that once a company becomes too large, they're gonna squeeze their customers by jacking up prices, while the overall quality of the product stagnates or falls off due to a lack of competition. This brings me to a company that's often accused of being a big, scary monopoly. World Wrestling Entertainment, also known as the WWE. Now, put aside the fact that nobody's currently stopping competitors from challenging the WWE. For the sake of argument, though, let's assume that the WWE is and has been a monopoly since they bought World Championship Wrestling in 2001. Is the WWE guilty of what monopoly alarmists accuse them of? Again, the myth of the monopoly is that when a business dominates a market, that once competition is absent, that the greedy monopolist will have zero incentive to improve the product, while at the same time screw their customers by raising prices. But if the history of the WWE tells us anything, it's that Vince McMahon has done the exact opposite of what monopoly alarmists accuse him of. If anything, the WWE's product is definitely more affordable than ever. During the 1990s, wrestling fans needed a cable subscription plus shelling out another $25 to $50 a month to watch the pay-per-views. For those who don't know, pay-per-views feature the best matches of the year, which involve the climaxes for various storylines on WWE programming. There used to be only 4 to 5 pay-per-views per year, but eventually the WWE began producing a pay-per-view show each and every month. So if you wanted to see the big showdowns on the Royal Rumble and SummerSlam and WrestleMania, you had to pay $25 to $50 each month. The WWE Network changed all of this in 2014. For just $9.99 a month and a high-speed internet subscription, WWE fans can now watch every single pay-per-view. So Vince McMahon essentially cut the price of pay-per-views in half at the very least. Also, with a WWE Network subscription, you can literally watch any pay-per-view in WWE history, WCW history, along with old Monday Night Raws, Monday Nitros, SmackDowns, not to mention other original content. If you wanted to watch old pay-per-views in the 90s, you had to go to your local video store and pay a few dollars to rent it on a VHS tape. As for classic Monday Night Raw moments, you had to hope there was a best of series somewhere on VHS. So I can say with absolute certainty that no major competition was required for Vince McMahon to reduce costs for his customers. But that part is simple, because it's the second part where things might get debatable, and that is to the content of WWE's programming. The assumption here is that because WWE does not have major competition as it had during the 1990s, that they have little to no incentive to improve the quality of their in-ring product. These days, I constantly see comments on YouTube, along with wrestling fans that I'm friends with, complain about how awful wrestling is, particularly for adults. Much of the criticism is that WWE is too PG, too family-friendly. Not like the Attitude Era that featured flipped birds, crotch chops, bra and panties matches, old ladies giving birth to hands, and so much more. This topic seems to be common amongst retired wrestlers and pundits like Stone Cold Steve Austin and Jim Cornette to discuss on their podcasts and YouTube channels. So this sounds like it makes sense. WWE bought WCW in 2001 during the peak of the Attitude Era, and it's all been downhill ever since. Of course it's because of lack of competition.
Of course!
If there was a WCW or a competitor that could give Vince McMahon a run for his money, then Vinnie Mac would be forced to improve the quality of his product, much like during the Great Monday Night War. But this ignores a few key facts. First, it was Vince McMahon's cutthroat tactics that made wrestling, particularly the WWE, so great and mainstream in the first place. Before WWE really took off, the wrestling industry was fragmented into various regional territories. And all of the wrestling promoters had these agreements or unwritten rules or whatever that they would not invade each other's territories. In other words, they would not compete with one another. Everyone stay in your lane, and every once in a while we'll maybe let each other's top guy go to another territory to lose to the hometown hero, and vice versa. There's a solid video from Business Insider that explains all of this, which I'll link to down below, and this history is also addressed in the Andre the Giant documentary that came out recently on HBO. So in the 1980s, Vince McMahon said, "Fuck this, I'm gonna get a cable television deal, and I'm gonna take every promotion's top star and bring them under one wrestling promotion." By the way, everybody wins from this consolidation of the market. Vince McMahon becomes the king of wrestling. The fans get to watch a much better product with the best of the best wrestling each other all the time, and the wrestlers get to become household names and make a lot more money. And this is all thanks to Vince McMahon breaking the territory rules and killing his competition.
Because you have to grab your competition by the throat, and you've got to squeeze the life out of your competition.
If it were not for Vince McMahon consolidating the wrestling industry in America, we never would have gotten Hulkamania or WrestleMania or Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock or Degeneration X or the Attitude Era. It was Vince McMahon's monopolistic business tactics that made wrestling mainstream. This all brings me to point number 2, other factors for the decline. Look, I would not consider myself a wrestling historian by any means. I'm only going by what I see. But between 2002 and 2004, the WWE's top guys were The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, then Brock Lesnar, and then Goldberg. Especially with The Rock and Brock Lesnar, I can only imagine that Vince McMahon and company had big, long-term plans for these guys, given that both were pretty young and really popular. But as we all know, by 2004, The Rock would eventually leave the WWE for Hollywood, Brock Lesnar would leave the WWE for the NFL, Stone Cold Steve Austin would retire from injuries, and Goldberg would leave for personal reasons. That's 4 of the biggest stars ever leaving at the same time. Call me crazy, but I think it's pretty hard to replace that kind of talent. Thankfully, Shawn Michaels returned, and the WWE had other stars like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero to take over, as blue chippers like John Cena, Batista, and Randy Orton were around to make up for the loss of Brock Lesnar. Unfortunately, Eddie Guerrero would eventually die from a drug overdose in 2006, and Chris Benoit would kill himself in 2007. That's 2 more main event legends gone from the WWE roster. I honestly can't imagine how much better the WWE would have been in the mid to late 2000s, with The Rock and Brock Lesnar as the top 2 guys, with John Cena and Randy Orton and Batista battling out in the mid-card to finally overcome the odds by challenging The Rock and Brock Lesnar for the championship, much like how Stone Cold, Triple H, and The Rock overcame the mid-card in the mid to late 90s, along with a loaded roster featuring Chris Benoit, HBK, Chris Jericho, Edge, Eddie Guerrero, and so many more. So between 2004 and 2007, 6 of the WWE's top 10 stars were gone from the company. And apparently this is an issue that WWE still struggles with the early retirement of CM Punk and injuries to Daniel Bryan. And I know injuries and shit happen, but the point is, having competition from WCW would not have changed the fate of The Rock, Brock Lesnar, and Stone Cold Steve Austin's career, and WWE's product still would have suffered because of the talent exodus. This brings me to point number 3. WWE's decision to go family-friendly is understandable, mainly because the story of Chris Benoit and his head trauma wasn't really the best publicity for the WWE. Here was WWE making sports entertainment with big cage matches and people jumping off ladders and hitting each other in the head with steel chairs and blood and so on. Then one of their biggest stars literally snaps and kills his wife and kid before killing himself. And many attributed Benoit's behavior to concussions and steroid use. This is probably not something that would convince loving moms and dads across America to let their kids stay up past their bedtime to tune into Monday Night Raw. I'm also not sure that the stories of stars like Scott Hall and Jeff Hardy battling drug addiction help the company's image either. On top of all this, the Attitude Era was long over. Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock left the company, Mick Foley was long gone, D-Generation X had not been resurrected yet, so why not go back to being family friendly? Again, I'm no expert here and I have no clue the reasons why WWE decided to go PG. I know some have attributed Linda McMahon's entrance into politics as a reason for this, but think about this. After Chris Benoit, the WWE and Vince were risking the possibility of losing the family demographic for good. The WWE had no reason to continue the edgy, young adult programming because the guys who made the Attitude Era special were all gone. So why not turn John Cena into the all-American superhero and go right after that kid audience again? After all, it worked so well in the 1980s and early 90s, and seeing how insane WWE's stock has grown over the years, along with networks lining up to throw money at Vince McMahon for television deals and paying solid dividends, can you really blame the WWE for going this direction? Sure, if you're an adult and pine for the good old Attitude Era days of wrestling, this might suck for you. You'll never get to experience those glass-shattering, stone-cold pops ever again. Stone Cold Pops. Now at Circle K and Walgreens. Anyway, no more comedy routine promos from The Rock or grown men putting hot babes through tables. But hey, it's not for you anymore.
Otherwise known as not our f***ing demo anymore.
Vince McMahon has to make money, and what he's doing right now seems to be accomplishing that goal rather well. And finally, I'll conclude by addressing the obvious. The fact that there are competitors to Vince McMahon and the WWE, like Ring of Honor and TNA. Not to mention international competition like New Japan Pro Wrestling and promotions in Mexico. According to Diamond Dallas Page in a recent appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, the independent wrestling scene is beginning to grow. And it's not like if WCW still existed, it would be a reliable competitor. WCW seemed doomed to fail from the beginning, as the company did not even turn its first dollar in profit until 1997. According to Eric Bischoff, who has been discussing the history of WCW on an ongoing podcast called 83 Weeks, listen to any episode of this podcast and you'll come away realizing that running a successful wrestling promotion is no walk in the park. Eric Bischoff was constantly dealing with backstage politics, writers, wrestler egos, and corporate higher-ups after AOL bought WCW and Turner Broadcasting. Eric Bischoff had already proved that he was capable of growing a wrestling promotion, and even he struggled to get the financing and television time required to preserve WCW. Also, if wrestlers like Chris Jericho and the Radicals and Paul White were all eager to leave WCW, while Sean Waltman was willing to burn a bridge his first night back on Monday Night Raw, then what makes anyone think that Bischoff would have been able to recruit wrestlers back over to WCW in the mid-2000s? If WCW fell so hard into the abyss after the NWO and Goldberg hype died out, unable to recapture that Monday Night War magic that put WCW over for 83 weeks straight, then what makes anyone think that WCW would have been able to push WWE during the mid-2000s? Again, it's not like had Eric Bischoff managed to save WCW from the WWE that he would have been able to steal The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin or Brock Lesnar as he did during the 1990s with Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash, because those wrestlers left wrestling altogether. There's absolutely nothing to suggest that WCW would have been able to compete with WWE during the mid-2000s. So to sum things up, despite WWE being a big, scary monopoly, the price for WWE's product has gone down considerably. The product has not exactly gotten worse due to lack of competition, but rather WWE experienced talent departures and tragedies, which understandably caused them to switch demographics. And finally, ongoing competition from WCW would not have guaranteed an improvement on WWE's product. There are many legitimate reasons to criticize WWE as a company and their programming. Speaking personally, I'm very disappointed that the company is doing shows in Saudi Arabia, and I would like for the WWE to bring back some of that adult-oriented programming, but all of this talk of WWE being a big, scary monopoly is overblown.